how are you doing? This is Martin from Gardens for Life. So we got another questions and answers series here this time. This episode is all about growing food in a wood chip mulched garden or no dig garden, and we got 12 questions that people actually sent to us, and we're going to try to answer them all, and this time out in the garden, as you can see in the background, just for a change of scenery, because today the weather was actually quite nice and it wasn't too windy to record, although I am getting a proper microphone in the post now. So I'm just out here in the garden just to show you how I harvest the kale leaves, although at the moment we are at the end of January. The leaves are actually rather small because the plants that we put down in the ground was actually about 3 years ago nearly. So these kale plants have kind of gone a little bit lanky, for the lack of a better term, but that's why they're called walking stick kale or tree collards. You can grow them into actual walking sticks. So I'll show you here. There's actually proper wood in them. So this is basically the plant. As you can see, it has now turned into multiple stalks. There's a goji berry bush growing over here as well. So as you can see, the leaves are actually rather small. They're only about the size of a palm of a hand, and I'll show you a leaf that we harvested when these were only in the first year, and in the second year you get massive leaves off them. This is Portuguese kale now, and there's a few varieties. There's curly and not so curly, and even you can see here how far up the stalks come. They come all the way from the original plant down here. This is where it originates from. And I'll just show you here. That's my hand, just for comparison. It's probably about 2 inches in diameter, and there's actually 2 stalks, probably 2 separate plants though, coming off the one location. But as you can see, it's actually about 2.5 meters long at this stage, or about how many feet is that? 8 feet or so. And yeah, so this plant in particular, it's hardly worth harvesting at this point. We might actually just replant them, or I don't know if anyone else here has done it. Would you cut it off at the bottom with the secateurs, and it might actually regrow from the bottom up. I'm going to give that a try this year. But as for this is a 3-year-old Portuguese kale plant, and we'll show you another one over here. Here's a massive marshmallow plant. Need to cut that back too, because marshmallow are the only ones that actually don't grow from the same wood every year. They grow from the bottom up again. So you can see here is another one, and they can grow quite tall if they don't fall over. Sometimes they need a bit of support, but we don't mind. We let them fall over and then they grow straight again. But I'll just show you the thickness. I'll just show you as a reference. I'll have my secateurs here. Good old Falco number 8. Now, the whole garden needs to be tidied up a little bit after the winter. But looking at the size of the trunk of the Portuguese kale here, that plant is almost 3 years old. And watch this now. It's going all the way over to there. You can see there's a few leaves and a few stems, and here's some more. It's quite a big plant, and there is a good bit of production in it yet, and there's actually flowers coming on now too. You can eat those like broccoli, just like sprouting broccoli. But they're also great for the insects, early bee food, and all of the other insects too. So how would I go about harvesting the leaves? I certainly wouldn't, these old ones here, you could pick them off, but the plant is just taking the energy back into itself. Always pick them at the stem, at the main stem, like that, and just tear them off rather than cutting them. I'll just show you another one here. You see, just where the leaf originates from. So don't just break it off of here. I've done it here once. Look, that's not good. That leaves the plant kind of open for diseases to enter it. So you're better off to break it off at its base. and it can heal itself better. Here's another one. There you go. That's basically how I do it. And that's the Portuguese kale. I'll show you a quick video of what it looks like when it's flowering, and also you could actually take these stems off, and all the ones that are kind of straight, you could use them as walking sticks or walking staffs even, if you like. We had the idea one time to actually grow these on a small scale commercially, just for the crack, and sell them to the little shop at the bottom of Patrick, which is a little holy mountain on the west coast of Ireland near Westport, and people go up and down it without shoes. I thought it'd be interesting to see if people might actually take these as a help to go up and down as a walking stick. Well, we didn't get that far yet. That said about the Portuguese kale, we were thinking of even using it for firewood. It's actually a hardwood, of course. It is really quite substantial, and as you can see, that's nearly 3 inches in diameter there, after only about 2.5 years. And we might actually grow kale just for firewood production, for the crack, but not sure if it would be worthwhile doing. But here's a plant actually, while I'm here. This is a hybrid poplar, and that plant is only, or that tree I should say, is only 2.5 years old, and it was only grown from a little cutting, maybe a cutting like that size. But look at the size of the stem diameter. That's a good 3 inches in diameter, and it's been cut back strong or cut back hard every winter, just to get cuttings off it, and we're going to grow more of them. Actually, might as well show you here. I know this is not really about food, but well, the willows you can feed to the animals, but willow leaves anyway. But the poplar, I'm not sure. These ones, see that now? That was actually stuck in the ground about a year ago, and it has grown quite tall at this stage, maybe about 12 feet or 360 high in meters. So yeah, poplars are pretty cool to grow into substantial enough trees. Here's a red Russian kale plant. We find that, of course, them being a brassica, they're biennial, which means they grow mass or leaves in the first year, and then they go to seed in the spring of the next year. They flower and then go to seed. But we find they overwinter really well, and they also grow at temperatures of from 4 degrees Celsius. And they can germinate at only about 10 or 12 degrees Celsius as well. So they're real something for colder climates anyway. So they work fine in Ireland, since that doesn't get particularly cold in Ireland, but as in like minus 20 or 30 in Celsius. But it can be quite a prolonged winter of about 4 months of maybe less than 8 or even 5 degrees Celsius plus. So, you know, red Russian kale is a really good producer for this climate. But also, of course, the Portuguese kale is another. As for perennial vegetables, it's hard to say which one is the most productive one, because it depends on what you want to eat. Definitely the Portuguese kales are very productive, but only for so many years, because they get very lanky, and of course the leaves keep growing further and further away from the point of origin, so they get taller and taller and fall over. But Portuguese kale will be our favourite, but there's also the tubers as well. They're sort of perennial, because you keep them, they're hardy enough, and you can just leave them planted and basically do very little work to keep them going year after year. The Jerusalem artichoke is definitely by a mile the most productive thing, but it's low calorie, which can be a good thing if you want to be on a diet. But also they're only really good for eating at a certain time of the year, at the end of the winter, when they're no longer have inulin in them. Basically it's just a starch or a carbohydrate that we can't digest, which also gave it the name artichoke. So I'll show you that here. Hang on. Here's one of our Jerusalem artichoke patches. Here's the mother. Now, so here is basically, it was only planted up as a bit of a fence or a hedge really, just for a bit of privacy for our guest accommodation up here. And let me just show you. And it started off as about 10 or 12 plants, and now this is 3 years after 3 full growing seasons. And as you can see here, each of those stalks is actually a plant, and they grow really, really tall. And maybe you can see that here. Can you see it there now? This is the tallest one here. Hang on, up here. So they grow to about nearly 4 meters tall. And this was also a lasagna bed that we set up originally. This is actually the horseshoe garden. If you're interested in seeing the progress of this garden, here's more of the Portuguese kale as well. If you're interested in seeing some pictures of the horseshoe garden and its progress over the first season, take a look at our projects page on our website. But all of these stalks here now, they make for really good insect overwintering habitat. So you can take them and put them actually in a pile. That's what we usually do. We just put them on a pile on the side here. And we haven't had a chance to clean this part up yet, but we've been digging up the tubers here along the path so that they don't take over the path over time. And it's been masterfully productive. I'll just show you a quick bit of a video there of harvesting them. And we've been taking hundreds of kilos out of here, and they're still growing and growing strong, and the compost is still very much intact and fertile, but although we are exporting quite a bit of material. But every year they come back, and we don't have to do anything for them. Just have to watch out they don't take over the paths. But the way to do it is just weed them along. Just take the tubers out in the winter, maybe a foot worth towards the edge of the bed, and then they'll kind of regrow into that area over time. But people are kind of afraid of Jerusalem artichokes and mints and that kind of thing taking over the place, especially when you use wood chips. But I don't think it's a big problem as long as you, as long as you just keep calm and just basically keep an eye on them. And I find also that see that path here on the other side? Hang on, I'll show you here. So this is like a wood chip path, but there's plastic underneath this and carpets as well. But as you can see here, there's carpets under here. Now the stones are for the edges here to border off the grass so that the wood chips don't fall into the grass. There's actually carpet underneath here. That stops the Jerusalem artichokes from growing under the path or into the path. So it seems to do the job fine for the last 3 years anyway so far. So a lot of the tubers are actually a really good perennial vegetable, although they're not technically perennial, because the reason why they grow tubers is simply because they retreat back in under the ground to protect themselves from the harsh frosts of the winter in cold temperate climates. Now here in Ireland that's not really a big issue, but luckily we do have somewhat cold winters. Otherwise we wouldn't actually have any fruits on our fruit trees, because all of the fruit trees need a bit of frost, a certain amount of frost days in the winter to actually start flowering. And same as the vegetables as well, they won't actually produce seeds along the equator, which is a real problem for them, because they can grow huge vegetables, same as actually with the long summers at the Arctic Circle, like Northern Europe for example, like Scandinavia, where the days are really long. At the Arctic Circle is basically you have 24 hours of daylight on the longest day and 0 hours of daylight on the shortest day of the year. But they can grow really big vegetables, same as the lads on the equator. But the problem is they won't never go to seed at the equator. So we're lucky enough here now that we have kind of a middling sort of way, and we can I think cold temperate climates are ideal places for growing vegetables. Not so much fruit, but some of the fruits are actually really good to grow here, like plums and apples, and even the likes of persimmon and gooseberries, currants, raspberries, strawberries, goji berries as well, and blueberries, all that kind of good stuff. But the tropics are only good for growing fruits really. But anyway, back to topic. As for perennial vegetables, you could also grow for example trees for food, or even shrubs like the wood mallow would make for a good salad leaf as well. I'll just show you one of them here, and that's basically it's a perennial certainly, and you have leaves on it nearly the whole year round, but obviously in the winter they will actually die back, and they won't be as productive. But you also can plant other things like trees, for example, that have edible leaves, like a lime tree, for example. And there's tons of other ones that I don't even know yet. We're only learning here ourselves at Gardens for Life. So now here I am in the front garden of our house, and we have this wall used to be lawn, so we did the whole food for lawns thing, but also mostly because the lawn was more just costing us petrol and time and just maintenance. We kept a bit of it here, obviously, just for the kids to play ball and all that, and for us to sit down. But here, this area has become actually extremely productive since we've basically just put in lasagna bed on top, and we bordered it off with these lovely natural stones here. So here's one of the sort of like, actually we have a number of fruit trees here. That's one thing I wanted to answer, the question about planting other plants around the fruit tree. Basically just kind of forms a guild, and it just means that there is other plants that support the tree, your main production plant. And you can do that by planting, for example, comfrey, and that's just a tap-rooted plant that can be used as chop and drop if you decide to do that way, or do it that way. You can also grow fruit bushes underneath the fruit trees, which I'll show you here. For example, currants do really well in shade. Here's a big red currant bush. This is the winter time, of course. So there's lots of wood here. Actually, I might take some of that wood off for hardwood cuttings to get some more red currant bushes this year. And there is, with every fruit tree, we've planted black currant. So you can see here, it's kind of messy at the moment. So this is the black currant here, and there is another one here, that's the red currant. So just in the same hole as the fruit tree, planted those real quick. And we also usually plant a few other herbaceous plants, or even annual vegetables among the fruit tree. You can also grow tubers in the shade as well. You can grow, for example, potatoes or okas underneath. They do quite well. And of course the currants leaf out really early, which means they're able to take up all the sunlight they need to produce basically to produce berries, or to take in the energy of the sun before the fruit trees even leaf out. Trees always leaf out a little later. Here's an old Easter egg that was actually on that berry bush since the last couple of times we moved house, since about 5 or 6 years ago now. So yeah, you can see that that berry bush has been transplanted quite a number of times. Well, 3 times so far now, but it's about 8 years old now, and it's still really productive. I don't know how old a currant plant can get, but probably about same as rhubarb, 40 years I'd say. Yeah, so you can also put sage, anything really that doesn't really need full sunlight, you can plant underneath fruit trees. As you can see here, there's a salmonberry on the right hand side there, that one, and the 2 currants again, and a gooseberry here, and some sage and oregano over here as well. So you can see here, so plenty of options anyway. And there's an insect hotel, but in general I would suggest anything that doesn't need full sunlight, just plant it underneath the fruit tree. And when you're planting things as a polyculture, you need to look for things that actually support the main production plant that you're planting. Typically speaking, if you're planting polyculture on a bigger scale, not just a little tenth of an acre front garden like ours here, we have more land out the back, of course, as you've seen. So we do plant other plants together. For example, with trees, usually you would plant 3 support trees, 1 native tree. It could be also a wild fruit tree, which has longer flowering periods, but also is a really valuable source for food for the wildlife, especially the birds. So the wild fruit trees are important. I'd plant one of those for every cultivated fruit tree that you're planting out. And I'd also plant a nitrogen fixing tree as well, such as a locust or one of those. You can also then plant another just to bring in the insects. The beneficial insects usually are attracted by plants called insectaries, and that's where the multifunction plants come in handy anyway. Yeah, so just basically to attract your pollinators to your garden early, before your fruit trees come into flower. That way you'll have way more pollination in your garden, which is also a really good tip from Stefan from Canada with his permaculture orchard. Now I have a question here about what vegetables would I recommend that are easy to grow for beginners, and well, it depends. The short answer is it depends on what you want to eat or what you like to eat. I would suggest, if you're not too picky, what I would suggest to grow is the easiest thing is definitely kale. I wouldn't bother with cabbage, but I definitely grow kale. For example, Portuguese kale and red Russian kale, and black Tuscany or Nero, or there's another third name for dinosaur kale as well. Those are the three kales I would grow. That's the ones we've been growing for years now, and they're really productive and really easy to grow. And you can pick the leaves one at a time rather than waiting for the whole plant to mature and form a head like a cabbage. And you can pick the leaves basically any time of the year. Even you can leave them until the winter time as well and pick them then fresh in the winter and cook a nice soup. So you can also grow radishes, and you can grow, they're really easy to grow and very satisfying, even easy enough to grow for kids if you want to get your kids into growing their own vegetables. You also grow salads, but the problem is growing salads on the ground outside is that they kind of are very vulnerable to slug infestation. So if you have a little greenhouse, you can always grow the salads in there on a table, in a tray, or in large pots, and or even buckets. That's the way I would do it. And we're going to use these crates here. I'll just show you them. See, these we get these second-hand, these old grocery baskets, or like they're like I don't know what they used to use them for, but they're end of life anyway. And we fill them with compost, and we just we're going to grow them on tables. We're going to build these little tables, and we're going to grow we're going to grow salads in them basically near the house, so in zone 1 from a permaculture perspective, in order to be able to access them very easily on a daily basis. So yeah, kale and salad and radish. But also, if you're looking for more long-term vegetables that take a longer time to grow, pumpkins are a really good one, and they store really well as well for a few months. But you have to get those started fairly early. You'd want to nearly get them started as a little plant or buy the plants in a garden centre. We always start our own plants anyway, because it's much cheaper to buy the seed, and at least you know what type of plant you're getting. You can grow any number of plants that way too, and you can even save your own seeds as well. We have a video on that actually. We have a few videos on seed saving, but especially on pumpkins, you can easily keep those going for year after year, and they'll adapt to your local garden and to your own climate and conditions of your garden. So pumpkins are really a good one to grow, and it takes maybe about 4.5 months to grow pumpkins, but they're really easy going and you don't have to maintain them at all. But they do take quite a bit of space in your garden. They need full sun as well. And maybe I guess one or two other vegetables would be the tubers as well. They're actually easy to grow as well. The oca, the yacon, and some of the other tubers are like Jerusalem artichoke I mentioned earlier. They're really easy to grow, and you can keep those going year after year. You can save them and just keep them in your shed frost free over the winter, and you can then grow them on again the year after, so you don't have to actually buy them twice really. And those make for really good food, even especially in the winter time, of course, not in the summer, because that's when they are growing. So well, if you have a greenhouse and you have space, I would grow tomatoes and cucumbers, and peppers are really good as well, but they need to be started really early, but they're not as frost tender as the tomatoes. The tomatoes are really quite vulnerable to the likes of blight, like mold on the leaves, because they're very thin leaves, and and they can get burnt very easily by the sun. But anyway, tomatoes are well worth growing because you cannot buy tomatoes as good as you grow them yourself at home. And I don't mean that just because you're growing them yourself, but because the quality is just 10 times as good as what you can get in the shops. Definitely tomatoes is one thing we'd like to grow in the future, and we're going to put up another greenhouse. We have this greenhouse here, I'll show you now. This is in our little nursery out the back of our house, and yeah, we only use this just for the purpose of growing plants, just to get them started basically. Yay, we got another harvest of vegetables. Some courgettes, some runner beans, and some kohlrabi. And it's starting to rain. Bye bye. That's about it. I mean, there's 1,000 vegetables you can grow, but fruits are really easy to grow as well. You should definitely look into doing that, because especially berries are really expensive in the shops, and they're often sprayed with an awful lot of poison, so you don't want to be you just want to really wash them very well with hot water before you eat them, but they don't transport very well as well, so that's why they're kind of expensive. The likes of raspberries, strawberries. I haven't had a real strawberry from a shop for the last 20 years. You can't buy them. Even if they come from Wexford, they're no good. They're pure water. As far as I'm concerned, you have to grow them yourself, otherwise you can't eat them. You can't have them. They look like strawberries, but they don't taste like them at all. And of course, with that comes the minerals. And once a vegetable or a fruit comes from a healthy plant that has had all its minerals and all of the fertilizer it needs, or just a healthy soil life really, you don't need any artificial fertilizer, well then that's going to reflect in its flavour and its smell as well. If you're going into the supermarket, simply take your fruits or vegetables and just smell. And if it doesn't smell, forget about it. It's not real. It's probably been grown either hydroponically in Holland or in the south of Spain, in Alcantara I think it's called, the big greenhouses there, or it's probably been grown in some kind of with fake or man-made fertilizers. But anyway, grow your own fruit trees and fruit bushes. Definitely grow some apples and plums if you have the space. If you're in a housing estate and you can't have fruit trees, don't worry, you can have raspberries, and you can definitely have strawberries and black currants, red currants, white currants as well. They're a really productive thing to have, and they grow forever. Gooseberries are really awesome as well, but be careful with gooseberries. They'll ripen, and they'll oh wow, look at that, a massive swarm of starlings just went by. Gooseberries all ripen at once, and then the birds take them all at once in one day, so you need to be careful with those. You need to watch out and maybe pick them a little early. Rhubarb is another great vegetable. It's actually not a fruit, it's a vegetable, even though it's mostly known as a dessert, sort of I guess a plant. You can make pies, you can make wine from it. We made a lot of country wine with it. You can add it in with elderberry and that kind of thing, or other berries. You can also make an autumn cake. We have actually an autumn fruit cake recipe on our website as well, if you want to have a look at that. But rhubarb is a really good one. Go for Glasgow Perpetual, which is actually a good variety, really good flavour, very reliable cropper, and it actually can be picked all year, basically throughout the growing season. The stalks never go poisonous, unlike every other variety of rhubarb, where after midsummer the oxalic acid from the leaves travels back down through the stalks into the root of the plant. That doesn't happen with this variety. Glasgow Perpetual is the name. So I hope that answers that question. On to the next one. Golly, I need to keep these answers a little shorter, because otherwise we're going to go over an hour again with this video, even though we only have 12 questions today. Yeah, so from the same person that's asking about basic simple vegetables to grow as a beginner, or for a new gardener, and he was also asking would you need to rotate them. Rotation is basically where you just plant different types, with different vegetables from different families in the same spot, one year after the other, just to prevent diseases and that kind of thing, and the depletion of nutrients. Well, with no-dig gardening, you don't really need to rotate plants. or vegetables, you wouldn't really be too worried about it, because the soil life is actually very healthy when you don't dig it, especially if you have it mulched, and that actually helps to keep control of the overall biology of the soil, and it helps to prevent outbreaks of any kind of soil-borne diseases, such as even blight. Actually, I think originates from the roots of the potato. Yeah. Here's another swarm. Whoa, it's a huge swarm of starlings. There's the moon up there too. Oh, sorry about that. There seems to be an awful lot of starlings flocking about anyway. So rotation is not really something you need to consider when you don't dig the soil. It is something that helps to prevent disease in a garden that's not healthy or does not have a healthy soil, which was needed with the conventional kind of digging approach anyway, like where you plough or dig the field or your garden. It's not really a thing anymore if you're using the no-dig method. Okay, so the next question is, do we fertilize our plants or vegetables, or even fruit trees and bushes, after we plant them? Anytime after. Actually, that's a good question, and we do not. That's why we apply a big thick layer of mushroom compost before we put down our wood chip mulch, just as an initial boost and just to have a growing medium to plant our plants into in the first year of growing, rather than waiting for the cardboard under the wood chip layer, the mulch layer, to break down. We can just plant directly into the compost layer that way in the first year, and we can use it as a growing medium for the roots to spread. And eventually then they'll also penetrate through the actual cardboard layer, where the roots will then travel down into the native soil underneath. But we do not fertilize any of our plants at all afterwards. You could sprinkle a little volcanic rock dust onto the surface of your compost layer before you put the wood chips on, or you can put it on the wood chips if you like, and the rain will actually wash it down. It's just full of minerals and trace minerals that the plants need for healthy growth. So volcanic rock dust is definitely one I would recommend. You could also make comfrey tea or nettle tea, and basically you put some comfrey leaves or nettle leaves into a barrel for a week, and you stir them once a day, and they stink really bad. You filter them, you use your watering can, and you can then water your plants with it. There's loads of minerals in those, and loads of nitrogen as well, especially in the nettles. So you can just water the wood chips, water the plants even though they're already planted into the wood chip layer. But generally speaking, you don't really need to, because the wood chips actually break down and they have loads of minerals in them. And well, as I said the last time in the last questions and answers session, you can also you don't really, all you need is for healthy plants is minerals, a wide variety of minerals, and water, and that's what we're made of too. We're 90%, and like most animals, I guess, are made of 90% water and 10% minerals. So once your plants have their minerals and they've got plenty of water and plenty of aeration around the roots, because that's how the roots themselves of the plants actually take in the water and the minerals, is through osmosis, so basically in gas form, then your plants will be doing really well and they'll be very healthy. So yeah, that's it. Your wood chip layer will actually break down over time, and it'll also fertilize your plants, and your tap-rooted plants will also bring up minerals from deep down in the soil that other plants can't reach. And that's why we put comfrey around fruit trees, because the fruit trees have shallow roots that can't reach the minerals that are a few meters down, and we just chop and drop the actual leaves of the comfrey. What do you reckon, Schnapper? Isn't that right? You don't eat plants, do you? Yeah, so what variety of sweet corn did we grow last year? We grew Northern Extra Sweet, which is a Scottish variety, and it does really well in colder climates, which means basically our idea was, because we planted it a little late in June, we only planted it out from the greenhouse. We then were hoping that it doesn't have as long of a ripening time basically, and it worked to some extent, but definitely start corn early in the year and plant it out early enough as well. It's hardy. You can try a couple of different varieties. I would suggest going for heirloom varieties, or heirloom, sorry. And you can get those from Irish Seed Savers, for example, so that you can save your own seeds the year after, at the end of the season, and then use the same seeds that you're saving for the next year's crop. So yeah, so you can try different varieties. There's lots of them that grow very big cobs and very sweet. They might not ripen, that's the problem. So we'd rather play it safe and just grow modest varieties of corn. Same as most vegetables and other plants that we grow, including perennial flowers as well. We like to grow them in a greenhouse first, as you can see here in the background. And we have been growing our tubers in pots beforehand, or in trays, as you see in the new video that I just posted up actually, just there today. The oca tiny little tubers, just the little ones that we had left over, we just basically decided to make a quick video of it and planting them in a tray. Normally you would plant tubers in a pot, or each in a pot, and then plant them out, like maybe a half a litre or 1 litre pots. You don't have to do that. You could grow tubers and other vegetables directly, but the problem is that the slugs, they're very vulnerable to the slugs when they're that small, and they might actually end up eating what little growth is coming out of the tubers or the vegetable seeds at the very beginning, and it's hard for them to make a head start. It's best to literally give the plants a head start by simply growing them on a little bit beforehand. And Dara, I was suggesting to you, even if you don't have a greenhouse, you could get a little small greenhouse. You can buy those for about 40 or 50 euro, maybe 2 by 4 meters or 2 by 2 meters. It's well worth having it, and put tables in it, just to keep it, to have a place where there's dry and warm, so that your seeds can have a chance to germinate. But the tubers as well, they do much better in a greenhouse at the start, because you can start them early. Your production will definitely go down if you plant them late, same as all the vegetables, but it's no harm. You'll be okay if you have enough of them. It's well worth the investment though, to get a small little greenhouse like we used to have. Actually, we used to have a small little one we bought on eBay for 80 euro. I think it was about it was only 4 by 2 meters actually. I'll show you a picture of it here. That actually got blown away by the small little storm during the ploughing championship, just before Ophelia. I think it was before Ophelia actually, the big storm we had 2 years ago. Yeah, so then I basically just bought this one here that you can see in the background, second hand. And you can get polytunnels second hand quite cheaply, and if you don't have the space for one, this is a medium sized one now. This is 10.5 by 4.5 meters. But if you don't have space for a big polytunnel, you can always get a small little one, or get one in Aldi or Lidl. Just get any kind of a little growing space that it's dry, so that the slugs don't come into it. And you can put your plants up on tables, and you can also rotate them as well. You can have shelves, or you can have once the first set of plants is done, you can plant the next one already. So that's the way we do it here anyway. We do 3 sets of plants in this greenhouse, probably about 600 to 800 plants, and 3 waves of those basically. Most of them perennials that'll actually do very well outside. So I hope that answered your question. You can plant things directly outside, but especially Jerusalem artichokes will be fine if you plant them directly outside. I don't think it's a big issue. Let me just have a quick look at the questions here. When to start oca tubers in the tunnel in pots? I'd say you could start them at the beginning of April, because there is almost no point in doing it any earlier, because they will have to stay in the tunnel until the chance of frost is gone. They're a little bit hardy when it comes to frost, but not so great. If it goes to -2 or 3, they might actually lose the leaves and they might die. So you're better off. We always plant ours out in May, mid-May or later, and that way you're safe enough anyway. Same as basically ochas are the very same as squash and pumpkin plants and beans. Like, you just don't want to end up with a chance of frost. You can plant them out early, and if there is a mild frost, like maybe it goes down to 0, you're okay. I don't think it'll be a problem. But if you don't want to take a chance, just get some fleece and you can cover them basically just on top for that night of when the frost is there. We don't usually manage our stuff that well at all. We just plant it out at the right time, and then we plant out some more a week and a half later or 2 weeks later. We just plant things out in waves anyway and see how well it does. We never had an issue that way. So basically, start oca plants, and all the other tubers you can start either the end of March or any time in April, and plant them out about mid-May. And that's it. You can also plant Jerusalem artichokes out directly. You can plant any of the tubers out directly, but keep an eye out for slugs, because Yacon especially, the slugs are going mad for that stuff, and it's hard to even get a plant to establish without growing it into a nice big seedling beforehand. Now, I'm actually recording this question, or the answer to this question, the next day after I was recording the other questions, and it got a little rough outside. It's very windy today, and it's also just started raining as well, so I couldn't possibly make a video outside at this point in time anyway. So the question is, how would you go about growing food so that you can have something to harvest all year round? Well, the answer is simple. You need to diversify. Grow some vegetables and some fruits, and in terms of vegetables, you can also grow the likes of annuals or perennial plants. Annuals usually take more work, and perennial vegetable plants will grow year after year without you having to replant them. Perennial plants are a little tougher than annual vegetables because they have their root systems are already established, and they can compete with other plants as well. Obviously, in a no-dig mulched garden, you wouldn't have to worry about that because you don't have any weeds or unwanted plants. So what could you what could you actually grow? You could grow lettuce and kale. Those can basically be lettuce needs to be planted in succession. Basically, every 2 weeks, just plant a window box in a greenhouse, or plant some outdoors every 2 weeks. You can grow that for the whole growing season. And kale, you can definitely grow it from the start of the growing season in March until the end of it, basically about the end of October. But then it makes for a great winter vegetable as well. It can overwinter quite well. The leaves stay intact even if there's frost. You can also grow for the summer. Of course, you have all of the fruiting vegetables, if you want to call them that. Tomatoes and cucumbers if you have a greenhouse. You can also grow basically beans and peas and sweet corn and potatoes. Those can be all harvested. Most stuff can be harvested either after halfway through the growing season or towards the end of the growing season. If it's a vegetable that takes a long time to mature, like pumpkins for example, can only be harvested in October really. And but those store really well, so you'll have them all winter. And especially in the summertime, early summer, usually you get the raspberries and the strawberries, and then you get the currants, like red currant, white and red, and a black currant, and you get gooseberries. And later in the summer, you get another run of raspberries. Usually that's the autumn varieties, probably from September on. And then you get apples and you get plums. Plums come before apples usually. And so basically the summer and the late summer especially is usually when you can expect most of your produce, especially fruits and also most of the vegetables. But for the winter time, then you can have either kale, you can have Brussels sprouts, or you can have you could have cabbage if you like, but you don't really need it if you have kale. You can also have some of the broccolis and some of the beets and the parsnips. They actually overwinter quite well. Charles Dowling has a very good video on the garden in the winter, and he shows you what vegetables he's actually still got in the garden. And turnips as well are actually a really good one to store in the garden itself. You don't even have to pull them up and actually keep them in the shed. But then in early spring, let's say around February, of course, actually one other thing I forgot to say was all the tubers are available to dig up in the garden from November to March basically, or April. But in February and March there's very little out there, but you get that's usually the hunger gap. I don't even know when exactly the hunger gap is. Maybe you guys can give me leave a comment below and tell me. The hunger gap is usually before all the food from the year before that was stored runs out, or just after, and before the new leafy greens are available in the garden. Rhubarb is actually another one that actually comes out very early, and asparagus. So in March, April you can have rhubarb, asparagus, and some of the leafy greens as well. You can also start salads indoors as well. Besides that, you could use aquaculture or a hydroponic setup and grow lettuces as well all year round with a light inside. But I don't really bother with that because I feel like it's not really worthwhile. I'd just rather grow things outside. I hope that answers that question. So basically, you can have something to harvest in the garden all year round as long as you have a good diversity of plants. And that's all there is to it. So you have tubers, you have leafy greens, vegetables, you have root vegetables, you have berries and fruits, and that's about it, I guess. Do the wood chips make the soil more acidic? Depending on how much wood chip you add. We have been adding about 4 to 6 inches on all of our gardens, and it has not made the soil more acidic, mostly because the soil life loves it. It is just, our soil life is so healthy that the pH actually has regulated itself to an even 7 across the board. And if you watch the videos of Paul Gauci on YouTube, there's actually a goji plant, I wanted to show you that. It's already leafing out, this is only the end of January. If you watch Paul Gauci, he's in Washington State in America. He said that his pH is always neutral, and yet he can grow blueberries and hydrangeas side by side, basically, or even other plants that need an alkaline soil, and blueberries need an acidic soil. So, and yet they grow side by side, no bother at all. Once the soil life is healthy, you're fine. You don't have to worry about the soil or the wood chips actually turning the soil acidic. They only break down very slowly, just at the bottom of where they touch off the soil or the compost layer. And unless you add green needles, like just pure needles to your garden, I wouldn't do that. But if it's mixed, I wouldn't worry about it. Mixed, like wood, the branches, the wood, the bark, the needles, the leaves, all in one, it'll be fine. I want to show you this too. Oh yeah, this is how you know if it's a blackcurrant. You have all of these currant plants here. I want to show you them. It's actually a josta berry. I must take a few more cuttings off it. How do you know if that's a blackcurrant plant in the winter? You rub the bark really hard and then you smell it. Okay, and there's no smell of that. I know that's either a white currant or a red currant, which is a red currant because that's what I planted here. I didn't have any white currants at the time. And this one here, you can tell it's a slightly different colour as well. Oh, let's see. Oh yeah, you can smell the black currant in that straight away. So you can see there's also, you're probably wondering, Jesus, we have tubers popping up everywhere. That's because sometimes the wood chips, there's so many tubers in places, that the wood chips actually get slightly washed away by the rain around the tubers, and even the cats sometimes go into the garden beds, of course. But mostly it's to do with the rain actually. Well, eventually they'll break down, the soil life breaks down all the wood chips, and the rain actually can wash away some of the wood chips too from around the tubers. We have places in the garden where there's more tubers than soil. So basically, especially with the Jerusalem artichokes now, we found that there is actually literally 50% tubers and 50% compost or soil where we grow them, because it's so productive. This whole growing system is just awesome. I can't believe we used to dig the soil up and plough the soil and add amendments and then weed it all year round. There is absolutely no point. See, sometimes you can have something like this happen, where the wood chips get washed away a little bit and the roots get exposed. What we do here is really simple. We just cover it again. And that's why we put stones, like I showed you earlier in the front garden, around the edges of the garden beds. You're best off to do that and just renew the wood chips a little bit. Once a year, basically add an extra inch. Here's the giant rhubarb plant. There it is. It's only tiny yet. I'll just show you a picture of what it was like when it was in full growth. Look, come out to here. Oh, the leaves were massive on this thing, and that's only 2 years old. About 2 years it's in here now. This bed here is only 2 years old. There's a fig tree over there on the left hand side. Hang on. This is the fig tree. This is a brown turkey. And there's a peach tree over there, which is rather ambitious. There's also some strawberry trees, some honey berries as well, 5 honey berries. There's a goji berry, that was the one from America. It's the desert wolfberry. And we have a lovely Nikita's gift persimmon here, which is a tree with a fruit that's orange. It's usually known to people as kaki, and it actually stays on the tree until midwinter, and then it drops them all at once. And that's a different strategy for a plant, if you ask me. And there's our lovely willow tunnel, or willow arch. We have a few of those around. Oh, they need to be cleaned up a little bit now. I'm going to take all of the branches off the top and gonna stick those, and we're gonna make our little firewood forest now in the next few weeks. And there's another marshmallow plant. I'm going to cut those off because they're going to it's going to resprout from the stem at the bottom. Yeah, and there is an apple tree I grew from seed, which you can't really see very well. There you go. Which needs to be straightened up a little bit. And dandelions. We don't tear out dandelions on purpose. We keep them, because it's a very beneficial weed or unwanted plant. Well, in our case it's not a weed because we do want it. It's great for flowers, early bee food, and the salads can be used in a leaf. The leaves can be used in a salad. And all in all, you can even make wine from the flowers. There is no limits to that plant at all. The roots are actually a good medicine. I think it's a urinary tract medicine as far as I remember. It's a liver tonic as well. It does lots of things, like all of the same as all of, there's a thyme plant, same as all of the bitters anyway. So I hope that answers all your questions. Next week's topic on the questions and answers is, trying to remember, oh yes indeed, the nursery. There it is now. And I'll show you a few clips of the workshop that we had. We had 2 workshops here actually, just for casual workshops, just to learn how to actually how to have a workshop basically, and how to propagate plants, both from cuttings and from seed, and also how to grow on and pot on the plants, and how to treat them after you've grown them or rooted them successfully. So yeah, so I'll see you next week, or well, possibly in a week's time, as soon as we get time to edit these, because we're actually really busy now this time of the year, even though the garden hasn't started yet. The new growing season, it's on its way. So I'll see you at the next one, and please have your questions ready for the next questions and answers series, propagating plants. Thanks a million. Bye bye.